Sarah, thanks so much for doing this. So who are you exactly? And maybe even more interestingly, where are you?
Well, I'm Sarah Paul, and I'm currently in Abu Dhabi because I am an associate professor of philosophy and an associate dean at New York University, Abu Dhabi.
And yeah, so that's an update from the Norton Anthology, which has you down as teaching at Wisconsin-Madison.
Yeah, I just moved to NYU Abu Dhabi, I guess a year ago in September. So before that, I was at Wisconsin for 9 years. I decided to trade in the very cold winters for the very hot summers.
Right. What are you teaching at the moment?
I'm actually teaching a class. It's basically Introduction to Philosophy. We call it Central Problems here. And yeah, I'm using the Norton introduction. I love it. And I did not assign my own paper. And so that is not the reason why I'm using it.
Okay, so let's turn to your excellent essay in the Norton Anthology, John Doe and Richard Roe. So you start by stating three theses about self-knowledge that you say are part of common wisdom. And I was wondering if you could fill in a little bit about each one. So the first is no evidence, that when a subject ascribes a mental state to herself, it's not on the basis of evidence or grounds or reasons for thinking that she's in that mental state.
Right. So I should start by admitting that that claim is very strong and probably, even what I call common wisdom will allow for cases where you kind of notice that you've been acting strangely for a while now around Mr. Knightley and you sort of come to the conclusion that you must be in love with him. So probably a more careful and less bombastic way of putting it would be that the cases in which you do come to know of your own mental states on the basis of evidence or some observation are highly unusual and kind of necessarily so. It couldn't be that we normally related to our own minds in that way, epistemically speaking. So in the overwhelmingly normal case, the thought is that we don't rely on evidence. And I think we can elicit this intuition by thinking about how odd it would be for me to ask you about your evidence or your grounds. So if you tell me, gosh, Sarah, I really have a headache today, or I just can't stop thinking about this elephant. I'm thinking about an elephant right now. It would be very odd for me to say, well, how do you know, what are your reasons for thinking that you have a headache? Or what's your evidence that you're thinking of an elephant? And if I did ask you that, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to answer. It doesn't feel to us like we are appealing to evidence in these cases. And indeed, many philosophers have thought that this kind of knowledge of your own mind, can't have a foundation, precisely because it needs to be the foundation for pretty much anything else we can know. So that's the intuition there.
Right. And I guess there's a contrast here between our knowledge of someone else's mind. So if someone asked me, why do you think that Sarah has a headache? I normally wouldn't be hard pressed to answer. It's because you're holding your head and groaning in pain or gulping down aspirin or something like that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, there seems to be an asymmetry there.
Okay, so all right. So that's the first piece of common wisdom, and of course, whenever philosophers say, "Well, this is part of common wisdom," that's a sure sign that the philosopher is going to deny that these claims are correct. So, of course, it turns out that you reject all of these claims. So the second is what you call infallible. So if a subject sincerely believes herself to be in some mental state, then she can't be wrong. She really is in that mental state. And obviously there's a contrast here between my knowledge of your mind, because I can easily believe that you have a headache and be wrong.
Yeah, precisely. I'll just add to your observation before. I mean, when a philosopher professes to be reporting on common wisdom, there's a good chance that they're wrong because they've thought about it too much and lost touch with common wisdom. But I do think there's something really intuitive here as well in the infallible principle. And again, there's probably, if we wanted to be careful about it, we would have to be more nuanced about, you have to be paying good attention and you have to be kind of careful in your description about what's going on in your mind. But if you're careful, then the thought is there's really no room for a mistake here. If you sincerely think you have a headache or that you're thinking about an elephant, then you can't have gone wrong. And again, I think we can appeal to the practice of challenging people on their assertions, which seems to have no foothold here. So we sometimes use the word incorrigible in this context. It would not only be weird to ask you for your evidence that you have a headache, but if I said, I don't know if that's true, Alex, I'm just not sure about that. That would be quite odd because, we often think like, what could possibly show that you're wrong? Like what could possibly prove your assertion false? And if there's no way that we could prove you to be wrong, then the thought is there's just no gap here. You couldn't have made a mistake.
Okay, so the third thesis, which I guess is connected to the first two, is something you call first personal. The method a subject normally uses to ascribe mental states to herself can't be used in the same way to ascribe mental states to other people. In other words, the way I have of knowing that I have a headache or that I'm thinking of an elephant is very different from the ways in which I can know that you're thinking of an elephant or have a headache.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's clearly related to the first two. And as you say, you can use this principle kind of as an intuition to motivate the others. Really, it's meant to express the conviction that our relationship to our own minds is just profoundly different from our relationship to others' minds. And as you know, there's a long philosophical history of being skeptical about things like the existence of a world beyond our own minds or the existence of other minds. People have thought, it's consistent with everything I observe or everything that I know that I'm the only person who exists. I'm my, a qua-mental thing. I know that your article and textbook attempts to turn this dialectic on its head.
Unfortunately, we're not reading that. We're reading your article instead because it's so much better, but carry on.
Well, so you guys should read it anyway in your own time. And so Alex tries to turn this on its head and say, look, actually, we should be skeptical about our ability to know our own minds and much less skeptical about our ability to know about tables and chairs. But most philosophers have disagreed with Alex on this. And I think it's partly just because, we think, there's a real asymmetry here. And, if we could use the method that we use to know about our own minds, to know about others' minds, then none of the skepticism would make any sense. We could just have the same kind of infallible and groundless knowledge of others' minds. Clearly we don't. And so the method we use in our own case must be different.